So Claris stands in the gap for people who are facing really challenging situations. So it might be an unexpected pregnancy, which often that's it, but also raising a child in the first 5 years. And then no matter what decision is made, if somebody comes to us, whether they choose to parent or place for adoption or whether they do have an abortion, they need to know they're not alone and that there's somebody that will sort of be in the trenches with them, not just in that decision-making moment. So Claris is about being there before, during, and after those decisions, and then we build programs around all of that. So yeah, I think most importantly, just remembering that, unintended pregnancy, women's health, it's not the politically correct. It's not the things people love to talk about, or if they do, it's from very dividing points. And so I think for us to say, hey, look, regardless of where you stand on the issue, there are a lot of people whose lives have been impacted. Most people have in some way been impacted by an unexpected pregnancy. And so how do we come alongside and say, let's be there for people so they know they always have more than one option.
Welcome to At the Table, a podcast through Bel Air Church. I'm Drew Sams, the senior pastor. It's really interesting in Scripture, in the Gospels in particular, Jesus is either on his way at or having just left a meal. It's as if at the table is the place where his greatest miracles and teaching and ministry and community happen. And so the podcast that we're launching in this season is sitting down with people at a table, exploring the intersection of their faith and whatever work they do in the world. Very excited today to have Talitha Phillips, the CEO of Claris Health. She's been the leader of that organization for 24 years, nearly half of its existence in the women's healthcare space, and the impact that God is making through that organization as they stand in the gap where partisan platforms can often divide and polarize. This beautiful picture of what life looks like when you enter into the messy reality of humanity and how beautiful that can be to be part of what God is doing when you bring clarity. That's the name for Claris. And so it's my joy to introduce Talitha Phillips. Hope you enjoy this episode. Well, here we are, so excited to be with you and at the table, this podcast. So we're just getting started here at Bel Air Church. It's a joy to sit down with you, Talitha Phillips. What an amazing time that we've gotten to know each other kind of from afar over the last number of years, but you're a graduate of Pepperdine University, graduated in 2000, and then immediately the year after that, you became the leader of an organization that has a long history in here in Los Angeles. Now it's been 45 years plus, I believe, in Los Angeles. But essentially, you were the leader, and now CEO is the official title for 20, how many years has it been? 24 years?
Next month, yeah.
24 years. So we're going to talk about a lot of things, leadership, what is Claris Health, and right now in this moment, what gives you the most joy in this moment before we dive into some of the deeper topics?
Oh, gosh.
Threw you for a curveball right off the bat. You just got out of the freeway and the traffic.
I did. Not giving me joy is the LA freeways. Well, I am actually going to go out on a sabbatical this year. So it's giving me a lot of joy and a lot of angst at the thought of taking a little bit of a break. And my first time in 24 years, I'm taking a little break.
That's a big deal.
Yes.
So 24 years, you're the acting CEO of a growing organization, which we'll get into. It continues to expand and have tremendous reach. And we'll get into all the details of what Claris Health is. But when you look ahead to that sabbatical, how long is it going to be?
A little less than 3 months.
And then do you have a whole plan for what you're going to do?
No plans yet.
No plans.
No plans. No time to plan yet. So yeah.
So
sleep.
You're just too busy.
Sleep.
Nice. So is it more of one of those like is it the board who grants that sabbatical? That's huge for them to do that.
Yeah.
And is it just to give rest to you, basically?
Yeah. Also an anonymous donor who just felt like that was a gift that they wanted to sort of hopefully extend the longevity of my time by just saying, pause. And my oldest is going to college in a year, so spending time, her time at home is limited. So spending some quality time with her and visiting some colleges and all of that.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Well, there's a video that's up on the Claris Health website. I think it's like 2 minutes and 14 seconds. So great when you have these videos that can summarize like the tip of the iceberg of an organization. But the very end of this video was so great. I thought this could be a nice entryway into some of our conversations. But the video ends and it says, in a world that tries to divide us and views unintended pregnancy as polarizing, Claris stands in the gap, focusing on people, not politics. We could dissect each of those words there. Yes. But why don't you, as the CEO, why don't you give us, and the listeners, if they're not familiar with Claris Health, tell us what is Claris Health? I know Claris means clarity. Yeah. But first, what is Claris today? And maybe after that, we'll go into a little bit of its history. And then I want to hear a little bit more about your backstory and what brings you to today.
Well, yeah, that sets up the stage really well. I think in a nutshell, Claris really is about people. And I would say being in a city like LA where, a lot of people look at LA and we're not always known for the beautiful views. We're known for a lot of the really harshness of the city. And that leaves a lot of people very vulnerable and lacking access to care. But I would say most importantly, lacking access to community and what we would call family. So Claris stands in the gap for people who are facing really challenging situations. So it might be an unexpected pregnancy, which often that's it, but also raising a child in the first 5 years. And then no matter what decision is made, if somebody comes to us, whether they choose to parent or place for adoption or whether they do have an abortion, they need to know they're not alone and that there's somebody that will sort of be in the trenches with them, not just in that decision-making moment. So Claris is about being there before, during, and after those decisions, and then we build programs around all of that. So I think most importantly, just remembering that, unintended pregnancy, women's health, it's not the politically correct, it's not the things people love to talk about, or if they do, it's from very dividing points. And so I think for us to say, hey, look, regardless of where you stand on the issue, there are a lot of people whose lives have been impacted. Most people have in some way been impacted by an unexpected pregnancy. And so how do we come alongside and say, let's be there for people so they know they always have more than one option.
So do you find, 24 years in, has Claris always had that mission? Did it pivot at some point? Was it always about women's health? Was it always about coming alongside women in unintended pregnancies, let's say, in those first, few weeks and months and years of what that reality means? Or was it something bigger or smaller? Or has it always been like that?
No. I would say the heartbeat is the same. I think that I'm only the fourth of, there's only been 4 leaders of the organization. And only 2 have ever been paid. So everyone has had a very long, our 50th anniversary is next year.
Okay.
So it's been a long history. But it started a few women who really just wanted to provide education for people in these situations. It was, I think, pretty soon after the Roe v. Wade decision was passed, and I met the founder. She passed away in her late 90s, but she said, we just wanted women to know that they weren't alone, and that we could provide some education. And then, it was very small, and then 20 years later, the next wave came in. And said, okay, wait, it's more than just education. We need to provide services and material support. And but to give you an example, when I joined in 2001, our budget was $90,000. There were 2 of us on staff, very part-time. And we were not a medical clinic, so it was mostly counseling and resources and support. And so in the last almost 24 years, we became a licensed medical clinic. We realized it's not just about pregnancy, and pregnancies don't just affect women, right? Mm-hmm. They affect men, they affect children, they affect future children, and they affect entire families. And so I would say, yes, women's health, might be one of the priorities, but it's really family health. We're all about thriving families. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about pregnancy, it's prevention. So we have a whole youth education program. We go into the schools. We would love to put ourselves out of business because no one would need our services anymore. So there's the prevention. Then there's those services. We also do sexual health So STI testing and treatment. We do prenatal care. We do adoption support, post-abortion support, therapy, court-mandated parenting classes. And so really, no matter what avenue in that sphere, we usually or typically have some kind of a program.
Well, and that sounds so different than a very thin approach, which can be, let's just talk about the partisan platform, or let's just talk about changing the law, or let's just talk about this kind of mandate from on high. It's very different when you take a holistic approach that enters into the reality, the complex reality that is different for every individual. For you in this role for 24 years, what's something that you have come to understand in a deeper way as a result of moving towards the reality of people? Because sometimes people can be from afar, reading headlines, looking at stats. It's easy to type something on social media, feel like they've done their work, move on. But when you move into the complex, messy reality of the human experience, and you're taking a holistic look at how you can come alongside women and a family system, if that's there, to be there for whatever option they choose, to sojourn with them, what's something that has been a new point of view for you in these 24 years?
I mean, I think the simplest term is just how complex these issues really are. I think there's a tendency to see things through our own lens only. And I would say, having sat eye to eye with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, I've wrestled with the platforms on all sides. I've wrestled with, what do I believe? Do I still believe what I believe? What about this situation? And then I have always come to the conclusion that just loving people means sometimes just sitting with them and not having the answers, or you can't tie a bow on every story. But I think also, so when I didn't choose to work at Claris, my coming to this role was very much an act of surrender. I did not want to do this. I have 3 brothers. Women's issues. If you would have told me I'd work in women's health, I would have said there's absolutely no way. So this was not the calling I chose. God definitely placed me, or he more like dragged me into this. There was like a lightning over the head moment of, no, you actually are supposed to do this. And so, so that in itself, for me, I think the most eye-opening thing was when I got here, I thought, well, okay, fine. I mean, my attitude was like, if you're going to make me do this, God, you better make it abundantly clear. And he did. And then I said, okay, well, I really care about women who, like me, I mean, when I was 19, I grew up missionary kid, had a faith my whole life, and then found out I was pregnant, and just out of fear and desperation and shame, ended up having an abortion, and then said, well, I'll just go on the rest of my life punishing myself for this decision that I've made. And I mean, I remember saying, like, well, if God tries to forgive me, I just won't let him. I was so dead set on, I'm just gonna suffer forever for this. And so it was God's mercy that found me and said, I'm not going to leave you in that state. And then used this little tiny organization at the time that didn't even have a director in place to say, okay, I'm going to have you go through this group, and brought so much healing to my life. And so I thought, well, it's amazing. And they said, will you volunteer? And I said, of course I'll volunteer. Like, I'll help other women who have had abortions, or maybe think they have to have an abortion because they're afraid of their family or their, whatever. But then when I joined the staff and realized, oh my gosh, I actually care very much about the men involved. I care about the people who choose to parent, but it's hard to parent a child. I care about adoption. I care about these future, so I think my heart really grew to where now I am surrounded by women, and I'm in this field, and I can't imagine doing anything else because I love it.
That's amazing. So many things that you shared. I want to come back to a few of those. So you grew up as a missionary kid, And I'll make some assumptions and you can shatter my assumptions, but you used some language around unintended pregnancy at the age of 19, and yet there was shame and a decision was made. Would you say that, here's the assumption, that the shame came from a particular Christian viewpoint? Was it part of how you were raised? Was it a cultural thing? I'm very curious to kind of peel back the layers there, because often it is shame that causes people, whatever the topic is, whether it's addiction, whether it's a pattern of something destructive. Sadly, sometimes it's in a faith context, a Christian faith context, where people hide and withdraw. And in that isolation, really difficult things get much worse. And where we don't respond, what seems in the way that God longs for us to be vulnerable and to be courageous. But sometimes there's systems and there's cultures in place that really don't allow us to do that or give us great fear to do that. So help me understand the shame, if you're willing, to share some of that.
Yeah. I grew up in Europe. My parents were with Youth with a Mission. And then when I was like 13, they moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Enter shame. No, shame number one. No, the Bible Belt though. But yeah, I went from, being in Europe and sort of seeing the world, and we were, really third culture kids, and then moved to the Bible Belt and ended up at a Christian school for a little while where, it was really shocking to see, in Europe, to be a person of faith was hard. Like it wasn't culturally accepted, right? So we were the weird American kids.
Because it's post-Christian, almost pre-Christian.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. So then you go to a culture where everyone's culturally Christian, but that doesn't necessarily mean much. So it was very, sort of earth-shattering to try to figure out, okay, where do we, and you're struggling with the third culture kid thing of like, well, we didn't belong there, but I sure don't really belong here. So where do I belong? And so having all these really big questions as a 13,
on top of all the other things as a 13-year-old.
Other. And you don't know, like all 13-year-olds do they all deal with this? And so, I never left the faith. I never, my parents were really great, and they really encouraged us in so many ways. And, so when I found out I was pregnant, I was in college. It was like, you make a mistake, and then it's like, where do I go with this mistake? And my dad had my entire life made a lot of comments. I think this is such a challenge as parents, like the things we say that our kids hear and make assumptions. But, my dad had made comments about other girls that we knew who'd gotten pregnant, and, it's their life is over. What about, their future, their school, their this, their that. So, here I am, the oldest, the only girl. I had a scholarship to Pepperdine, an academic scholarship, and you're faced with, okay, so what happens to my scholarship? What happens to my parents' reputation? I was the hero child, and I have a brother who he would not be surprised if I said he definitely is not. He was the wild one. So it's like, what happens when the good child is also bringing shame on the family? And so there was a lot of that. But then I think there's the personal, like, what does this say about me? And my boyfriend at the time, his family, and they were in his parents were in Bible college in Oklahoma, just all the things. So
many layers to it,
so many layers, yeah. And yes, the Christian culture, I think, is we are very good at creating shame, or the appearance of shame. So.
Well, and it's so interesting because there seems to be this, I'll say it from my vantage point of being in ministry for 20 plus years. Sometimes we can create an environment that isn't full of both grace and truth. I love how the Gospel of John describes Jesus as full of grace and full of truth. And those two things seem to be mutually exclusive. And I think there's this tendency for people to latch on to one of those two. Jesus is either all grace and we compromise truth, or it's all truth and we compromise grace. And yet Jesus doesn't fit any of the boxes that we have. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, let me share a story with you and tell me if this was a good move or not. So I was a young youth pastor, and there was a lot of students in our youth ministry who experienced unintended pregnancies. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to create a culture where there was a safety, and that was a word that we used. And there was one young lady who was immediately kicked out of her home, so now she's staying with a friend, sophomore in high school. Mm-hmm. She talks to one of our leaders, who was one of her Bible study small group leaders, a female leader who, brought it to me. And so I said, why don't we connect with her? And so we met up with her. And she's like, my parents have kicked me out. I don't know what I'm going to do. And my boyfriend is like, we have to get an abortion. And he's already made the appointment and we're going. And I just feel like some of your language, my world's over, my life's over. And I said, your life's not over. Romans 8, there's nothing in all of creation that can separate you from God's love. Yeah. And we want to walk this journey with you. And then she says, well, obviously I can't get an abortion. And I said, that's your choice. And there was, I know, many people who are listening to this right now who would say, wrong answer, Drew, you just failed. Aww. But the reality is it is a person's choice. And I said, here's the reality that I think will happen as you walk out this journey. Either way, God loves you, and you need to know that. Either way, we are with you. And it kind of caused her walls to come down. And then she says, well, I have this, my boyfriend's pushing it so hard. I don't know, I'm on the fence, and he's going to pick me up and he's going to drive me. So I said to her, how about she and I, the other leader, why don't we drive you to the appointment? And the thought was, rather than the only person in her voice as someone, you have to do this, because he was taking the choice away from her, really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why not two people who were praying for her, who loved her, and she was like, you would drive me, but you're a pastor and you're my Christian leader. Yeah. And I said, of course, we're here with you no matter what. And she says, well, let me think about it. And the next day she reached out to us and she said, oh my gosh, I'm having some medical stuff and I'm going. And long story short, she had a miscarriage. So it ended up not being a choice that she needed to make. But I remember sharing that story years later with different Christian leaders. And it was really remarkable how mad people got at me. Yeah. And I still stand before God truly believing it was the right decision. But I'm curious, you are someone who's had a very different lived experience than me. Yeah. So I can never know what that's like. But that kind of environment that we were trying to create of, here's what Psalm 139 says. Yes. This is life, and this is a being that's being knit together in your womb right now, made in the image of God, fearfully and wonderfully made. And yet you do have options. Yeah. But God loves you no matter what. Yeah. But here's the reality,
Gosh, there's so many things.
Deconstruct my bad leadership in that or whatever,
Well, here's what I heard that I love so much. I think even looking at Psalm 139 is that is true for her,
right,
as it is for the child, right?
Totally.
And I think that this is where the video you brought up, the world tries to divide, is that it's either you are pro-baby or pro-mom.
Not both, sadly.
Not both. Neither side is, and they might change their language to sound, but I think one of the biggest mistakes we've made and Christians have made and continue to make is to think that if you tell somebody they don't have a choice, that they will choose right or well. People have a choice. God gives us choice. Mm-hmm. Like it comes from Him. Mm-hmm. You can choose. He gives us that freedom. Not that our choices will always produce life in our life, right? Like we can choose a lot of things, and sometimes bad things happen maybe as a result of a choice. Sometimes bad things happen because everyone's making choices around you, and they happen, and you're the victim of somebody else's choices. So, I think what I love about that, and I'll give another example. We face this a lot because we have this incredible sexual health education program, and then a lot of Christian schools will say, absolutely not. They just shut us out. So our program is widely accepted in LA, and we're getting into international schools and really hard schools and homeschools, by the way. No problem, right? We educate the parents, and then we have these Christian schools that are saying, we will not talk about it. And I think there's this fear of, if you talk about abortion, they'll have an abortion. If you talk about sex, they're going to have sex. But the reality is, by not talking about it, they're still, I have a 17-year-old, and I know what the kids at her school are doing. It's not that they're not having sex, even though her school refuses to talk about it.
Interesting.
So we're having to get the education elsewhere. And, there's 1,000 kids that are not being educated. And by the way, it's happening on the school grounds. It's happening everywhere. So I think we need to go back to, look, I love you enough to give you the information to tell you, you have a choice. You do have choices. Because otherwise they feel trapped.
Yeah.
And like the girl said to you, right? Like, when you feel trapped, you either make a rush decision, maybe a regrettable decision, or a decision all alone, versus saying, yes, you have choices. Now, would you have actually driven her? Maybe you would have. You didn't have to. Would you? I think the idea of sitting, somebody like me, it would be very hard for me to drive somebody and sit in the lobby, because I think I probably have a lot of PTSD in that. Right?
Totally.
But you're in a very different seat.
Right,
so
totally.
I think
and my whole thought was, I just don't want that voice that is so, crushing her ability to choose to be the one that is the last voice that is driving the however many minutes to that meeting. But it's true. I do sit on a different seat in the whole thing, yeah.
But, people come to us, and it's not like we talk about all their options. But they're guiding the discussion. So I think that's one of the things that makes us really different, is they come in and fill out a decision aid, and then we just say, how can we help you, right? So if somebody comes in and says she's considering an abortion, we're not going to say, well, that's not an option. It's like, tell us why you think that's the best choice for you. How educated do you feel?
But even asking that question is so beautiful and so helpful.
Yeah.
Help us understand.
Yeah, where are you coming from?
Which is so different than shutting someone down.
Exactly. Because if you listen, what often comes out is, I'm considering this because I don't have anywhere to live, or my boyfriend doesn't want the baby, or my boyfriend really wants the baby. I don't think I can do this, right? So you're letting them, they're processing in front of us. We're not really doing anything. We're just listening. But if something comes out and it's, I don't have anywhere to live, would you like us to provide you with some resources for housing? Would that be helpful? Oh, there's resources for housing? Or, my mom is really pushing this. Would you like to bring your mom into the appointment and have her be a part of this? Oh, so it's literally just asking and listening. And we don't do abortions. They know that when they come in. So it's not like we're, misleading people in.
Sure.
They know that's not a service we offer. You'd be shocked how many people just want to talk about it and be educated and get all the medical information before they make a decision, which anyone should receive and not have to pay for.
Right. And I know that you are a person of faith who loves Jesus, and help me understand how that guides how you lead, your heart for these young ladies, the men, the kids. It's not a Christian organization, right? Claris Health. Tell me.
We're community-based.
Community-based,
That's largely led by people of faith.
Okay.
And so it motivates the work that we do.
So that's a really important key here. So this is the majority of people who are in leadership.
The leadership, so the board of directors are all people, Christian individuals.
Yeah.
But we serve anyone.
Yes.
And a lot of people come through our doors and may not know that it's a Christian organization. It doesn't necessarily impact any of the services that they receive.
Of course, yeah.
They get to choose. So I think for us, it's, in the intake, they fill out, do they have a religious preference or background? And if they do, we can guide that. Otherwise, they might just feel a lot of love. And the motivation behind that is our faith. But it's never brought up, never shoved down their throat, never, the door is cracked open when appropriate. And then we do have some, so like our post-abortion, we have a whole post-abortion group that I went through that is faith-based, but people opt in and say, I want to go through that Bible study. We have a non-faith version as well if people want that. And then there's a couple of our other programs that are, or some of our teachers will teach classes that are faith-based classes, and people know that and opt in as well.
So my definition of church is so much more than a building, so much more than an hour on Sunday. But to me, church is simply a community of people defined by the reality of who Jesus is. So in some ways, Claris Health is more the biblical church than a church that refuses to enter into the reality of people's lives driven by who Jesus actually is. And so I try not to separate, for example, Claris Health from the local church. To me, that is as much the work that God is doing in the world, and that is as much ministry as what and we get to be a part of, here at Bel Air Church. But tell me a little bit more about how your faith has grown in these 24 years. Do you find yourself in impossible situations where you have to ask God for help? Is your heart been enlarged, entering into the suffering? I mean, it has to be so formative for your personal relationship with Jesus. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you said that, because yesterday we have a joke with some staff where, when you don't even have time to get anything out other than like, Jesus help, like, Jesus help. Say that many, many, many times, those breath prayers throughout the day. But I think my faith has grown I think without having had this role, I think I probably would have been one of those very judgmental Christians. I think I could have been. And I think my compassion for people has grown so much. My compassion and understanding for ministry and how it's not cookie cutter, that Jesus reacted very differently depending on who his audience was.
Isn't that amazing when you study the life of Jesus? There's never a formula.
Never.
It's never copy-paste.
And he was always shaking things up, and people always were questioning. I feel like in my seat that my relationship with God is so much stronger because there have been seasons when I feel like he's all I've got. We don't find a ton of favor on either side all day long.
From the partisan side you're talking about now?
Even, the people are like, you're not Christian enough. You're too Christian. I mean, in 1 hour, I'll talk to one person and they're like, we can't support you because you're too Christian. The next one, we're not supporting you because you're not Christian enough, or you're not using the right language, or you're not saving the right people. Everyone thinks you should be saving someone, and it's usually the wrong person in their mind. So I think having to be okay with the gray, living in the gray a little bit more, but I've seen God provide in ways that he would never have provided had I lived a more comfortable life, or had Claris been a ministry in a more comfortable city. Then I wouldn't have needed him as much. I feel like I love that, I went to kindergarten on the red light district in Amsterdam.
Did you really?
And yeah, that was my kindergarten. And so now I think like my mom had to walk me down the red light district. I took my kids a couple years ago and I was like, oh my gosh, we can't walk down. How on earth did I do this as a 5-year-old, But I feel like in LA, I have conversations with my kids that my mom and dad had with me. And I'm so thankful that we see this and there's a need. And it just reminds me, I don't go a day without realizing how much we need a savior and how much I can't do this role without him. And I still make mistakes every day.
Amen.
But yeah, and I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a field that didn't help people now.
Yeah, once you're in and once God calls you to it, which you said earlier, it reframes everything. But 24 years, so 2001, 2 employees, $90,000 a year budget. Let's talk about scale today. And then we'll go from the here to there and that journey. So it was 90,000. So what's your annual budget right now? And how many employees compared to 90,002?
So today we have 27 employees, and our budget for our fiscal year, I'm just sent a budget to the finance committee at $2.6 million. But yes, there is a massive scale about to happen. So
that's huge.
Yeah.
So 28, almost 30x in terms of the budget. My quick little math.
Yeah.
I was on the math team in high school.
That's really good.
The people online will pause it and they'll do the calculator, and I will be off, of course. But that's huge in terms of scale. And a huge part of your role isn't just entering into the reality of each complex situation. It's leadership. It's fundraising, it's management, it's vision casting. Which one of those do you feel like is your natural sweet spot? And which one did you have to grow the most in over the last quarter century? And how did you do that, grow in that area?
Oh my gosh. So I know people always ask, like, what if you had to put like the secret of leadership or being in this role so long? I'm like, the only thing I can think is I was 23 when I started. I knew nothing, right? So I was just a sponge.
1 year out of Pepperdine.
1 year out, just absorb. And I've always had two jobs. So this is the other kind of interesting. So I'm also a doula. I'm a
labor postpartum.
Yeah. So I still.
You're the baby whisperer. I've got a lot of friends who sing your praises.
Oh, that's very sweet. I know. I just caught my first baby last week.
Did you really?
At Bel Air, 2 weeks at Bel Air. Somebody at Bel Air.
Oh, amazing.
Which was amazing. But so I think being a sponge and absorbing and then just leading from, I still am very connected to the people we serve. So I got a text on the way here from somebody who's due next week that had questions and came to Claris. And so I think the way, I think those are some of the quick, but wait, go back to your question.
Yeah, well, but on that, I think so many people who are in whatever role of leader, I think everybody is a leader in some way. You don't have to have the title of a leader, but you affect other people, even leading yourself.
Yes.
And I think there's a great principle that you shared there, which is to never lose sight of the people that you're leading. Because sometimes leadership, you can remove yourself and you can be so far away and disconnected that you lose sight of really what it's all about. So in your of all the things, so there's the leadership and the management and the vision casting.
Yeah.
Which one is like the natural? Okay. Like, wow, that came a lot easier than I thought it would have.
So I think the being connected to the people, so the storytelling aspect, the relating, the serving, that has always been very natural to me. Everything else.
So everything else.
Which
is the hardest? Fundraising? Is it the management? Is it the firing, the hiring?
Fundraising. So a little secret, I hate conflict, even though everyone that knows me thinks that's not true. But I can't sleep. So the idea of like, what if you ask somebody for money and they say no? Like that. So fundraising is challenging. What if you have to fire somebody? What if you hire the wrong person? What if you have to discipline? Like all of those things do not come natural for me. So it has been really tough. So I think I went to German school forever, right? So I can perform. So everyone's like, oh, she's got it. But inside they have no idea how hard everything
So it's like the classic duck metaphor, above the water. Nice and calm, under the surface.
I grind my teeth.
Right,
like if
really.
my dentist knows how hard everything is for me. So, but yes, it's all under the surface.
But have there been things that you've learned or mentors that have spoken in or books or podcasts or just the course of time that has made it easier? Or is it one of those, like, as Paul says, the thorn in my flesh, and I'm just going to cry out to God, your strength and my weakness?
I mean, so I think what I've really developed is messaging, like communication. So the reality is I wouldn't have walked into Claris and felt super comfortable when I was pregnant and didn't know what to do, right? Like the way there were like diapers everywhere and, the sweetest people, but like so I think what I learned is that this 23-year-old was like, we have to put ourselves in the seats of the people we're serving and say, is this relevant? What language are we using? What messaging? Are we actually saying things that that we can back up? And then staying true to that conviction, which means, I wrote a white paper on, reproductive health care and like, okay, but this is what we believe. And then being okay with that and leading with that. And so I can fundraise by building relationships. I can lead by, relationship, casting vision, communicating vision. Strategy is still not so much my sweet spot. And then, I guess I don't mind a challenge. I mean, I feel like there's always big challenges. And so, rising to the occasion of, we're in the middle of the biggest, craziest thing we've ever done, which is building this whole huge campus. And every day I'm like, there is no way, I don't know how we're going to do this. And then you just put one foot in front of the other and do the things you know.
And it's huge because 24 years, right? West LA, South LA, the mobile clinic, but now this new location in Inglewood. What was the seed of that idea? How far back did that go? Did that originate with you, with the board, someone? Did an opportunity come to you?
Yeah. So I think what the most beautiful thing about this is it's not me. And I feel like this is a legacy project that I hope on a national level, others will one day look at this and say, we can do that too, because it will survive without me. It doesn't need me. Now, it needs me right now. It's like an infant that still needs its mom now. But pretty soon, it can just do its own thing. And it came out of a strategic planning meeting in 2020. We're on a rooftop in LA with board and staff that came together and just said, what does the future look like? And we have, over the last 7 years, we have over 400 partnerships in the city.
Wow.
With other organizations. So the idea that we should not grow any wider than we are. We cannot be all things to all people. But the people who come to Claris have so many needs. And if you walk into any social service agency in LA, you're going to get about 6 to 8 referrals. And then if you have a history of trauma, or you don't have transportation, or you don't trust the medical community, you're left on your own to try to figure out, how do I get myself, maybe my children, to here and here and here, and it just doesn't happen. Yeah. It's fragmented. So we said, and we're providing warm handoffs, and I'm going to send you to Sarah over here, and Jennifer over there, and Thomas over there, and it's still too hard. So we said, well, what if we brought partners together under one roof? And it's not Claris, doesn't even have our name on it. We're in the DNA, but we're just one piece of this big center, community center, that says, we love the city. When you come here, not only can you, get pediatric care and therapy, but there's going to be a safe playground, a basketball court, a coffee shop, and we're going to just build this community. But every time you come in here, there's a care coordinator that meets you, and you know that there's services for domestic violence and substance use, behavioral health, therapy, pediatrics, all the insurance navigators, employment, human trafficking survivor programs, everything. And so we thought we were crazy. I still think we're crazy, but we just kept putting one foot in front of the other and ended up having 2 donors put up some significant money. So we were able to purchase a property and then hopefully breaking ground at the end of the year. And
So the stage now is the property has been purchased in Inglewood.
In Inglewood at Crenshaw and Manchester.
Wow.
So Crenshaw's the gateway.
Inglewood has been exploding with growth. I mean, I've had friends who have lived there for decades, pastors who have pastored there for decades, and they're seeing how much it's changing. But the complexities with that is it's also pricing out a lot of the generational people in that community, and people are moving in and people are moving out, but there's a lot of new development. But what a hub for the area.
It's a hub, and I think that a lot of money is poured into the city, but when money is poured in, it causes a lot of problems for the city. And so 2 issues we care a lot about are infant and maternal mortality, and especially with the African-American community. And Inglewood still has a large number of African-American individuals, and the hospital shut down their labor and delivery. So they don't have labor and delivery services anymore. And
so what's their option? I mean, how far do they have to go? Roughly,
it depends. So most of our moms deliver at MLK Hospital in Compton, about 5 miles from there.
Which, if you're in LA, 5 miles can be 45 minutes.
It'd be a lot, rush hour, yeah. So
will you is the vision for this place, which you're hoping to break ground by the end of the year, that labor and delivery would be able to happen in that facility?
We will do prenatal, but not labor, and they'll still deliver. But we have great relationships with hospitals that will expect them, and their records will be there. So another thing to eliminate is that people don't show up in labor and then they say, "Where did you get care?"
Yeah,
and it's like, "Oh, I don't know." So we transfer everything over, and so it's pretty powerful.
What is left in terms of fundraising to get that done?
A lot.
A lot.
No, we need to raise so we've raised $13 million.
Yeah.
So that the 2 sounds like that. That's why I was like $2.6 million, which sounded like a lot last year. This year I'm like, it's only 2. And,
Isn't that amazing how things get reframed?
Yeah, perspective, right? We need to raise $9 million to break ground, and then another 4 to cover like 3 years of operating and all the campaign costs and everything. So we're halfway, 50% there.
Yeah. Have there been moments in the 24 years that were more daunting than this moment? Or is this the most daunting of all?
If you asked my team this morning, they will say this is the most daunting. I think it's the biggest thing with the smallest. We're a real small. So of the 27 people on staff, there's really only a handful that are like full-time and very involved. Like I still am all of marketing. There's certain buckets where you would think they probably have 10 people. No, we have a lot of people serving, which is the way we want it. But the leadership is still really small. So
what's so beautiful about what you said earlier about the team being mostly Christian and the board.
Yes.
So you come to this most daunting of all moment, and yet we know throughout the history of course, Scripture, you see this again and again and again, the bigger the giant or the bigger the obstacle, the bigger the impossibility, just creates more room for us to encounter the God who is bigger than all of it. So that's what I'm going to believe for you, that even in this season, that this will be the deepest, richest season where you're that prayer you said earlier, help, that'll be just such a beautiful, fruitful prayer where you just say on the other side of it, that was doomed to fail unless God was in it. And clearly now that we're on the other side of it, God was in it because it was so big.
Yeah.
So this reality that you talked about Roe v. Wade and the kind of the origin story. And Roe v. Wade has been in the news in the last number of years. So I'll say it this way. There's people who kind of from afar see the headlines and they might not think about things until headlines pop up, and they might get excited, or not excited, but they're engaged. They lean in more. Have you found that people have come and gone over the 24 years based upon the broader national conversation? Or has it been the same consistent donors? How's that landscape changed or been affected? Because you're in the trenches, you're in it with everybody, and the need never changes.
The need, one originally when Claris was founded, they were founded by some women out of St. Monica Church. So originally it was entirely Catholic. Catholic women who were championing, and then Catholic families. And I don't even think anyone who was not Catholic even joined in any way until the 90s. So the first 20 or so years, and it was a woman named Susan Schutte who spearheaded, like, wait a second, why are other women and families not getting behind this cause. This is a huge cause. So she really led the charge. I will say I'm in some national CEO groups, and I have never found an organization that is has a more diverse support base, volunteers, donors, champions, than Claris. I mean, it has drastically changed, and I think that is very intentional that we've taken people on this sort of messaging journey to say it's not about how you vote or how much money you have, or it's all about, do you believe in providing this kind of care in the city? And when we just keep focusing, like, you've come to our gala, we don't pay people to speak. No. It's not a celebrity. It's the people who are highlighted are those who are served. And you just do a really good job of telling their stories and making them the hero, but raw, real stories. They don't all end with a happy ending always, but you honor them and you love them through that. That has brought people from all sides together. So I never know. So politics does not impact us very much.
It's just not part of
all.
Yeah.
People think it does or should. But, people always said to me, what happens if Roe v. Wade is overturned? And I was like, nothing happens for us, because nothing will change in California. And nothing has changed, so.
See, this is where people who aren't on the front lines, who aren't entering in the reality, they see a headline and they don't. And my heart breaks where there just seems to be so frequently, and it could be on 50 topics, not just this one topic. It's so much easier to, especially with social media, reshare a post.
Yes.
And that's so much less self-sacrificial than showing up to volunteer and to sit with someone. It's so much easier to, say things online, much harder to enter into the reality. And my heart just breaks for, I think, what people are missing out on when they feel like, okay, I've done my part, I'm going to move on. And then things, cultural values come and go. But I always have such profound respect for people who are in the trenches, and maybe that's the wrong metaphor, people who enter into just the reality of humanity for the long haul. And it's so beautiful to hear that whether it's volunteers or donors or people on the board, it's apolitical. It sounds like it's not even part of the DNA.
No, and people might be political and think this is their way of, but yeah, we're very intentional, and it just doesn't. Yeah, we just try to stay away from it because it's too polarizing. And at the end of the day, I believe, and I think I've witnessed that we have a lot more in common than we think. And if you go to social media, you think none of us agree on anything, and it's you're staunchly this. But the reality is, if you have conversations, I mean, in my doula world, I'm in celebrity homes. I'm in lots of homes with people. Lots. When I talk about the work that we do, if people don't Google us and find some, Yelp is trying to label us and always trying to, discriminate against us, right? But if they don't find that, they're like, I love what you do. But then if you read what somebody else says, you're like, wait, what do they do? So I actually think we have a lot more in common than people realize. And I love I'm like the secret agent all the time of like, hey, you guys actually are on the same side. You just don't know it because you vote differently or you yell differently on social media.
There's this great book that came out recently. Jonathan Haidt wrote a book with a co-author called The Coddling of the American Mind. And it originally came out of an Atlantic article, I think like 10 years ago, and the editor noticed that this article got so much traction that he went to Jonathan Haidt, who's this big sociologist, who basically told Jonathan, you have to write a book. Like, this is just blown away, the engagement levels of all of our recent articles. So he writes this book, and the premise of the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, is that we've bought into three great untruths or three lies. And one of the three is the common enemy rather than our shared humanity. And so much of our strategy within, whether it's politics, whether it's ideology, whether it's even at the corporate level, whatever it might be. It's all about the common enemy rather than shared humanity. So what's one practice that you do on a personal level to resist the lie of the common enemy, to push back against the polarization within society, to push back against things are either right or wrong, black or white, left or right, how do you, on a personal level, even before you show up in your role as the CEO of Claris Health, you're on social media, you're interacting with parents of, your kids' friends, you watch television. I mean, what do you do personally to push back against that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have my very close circle that I might say how I really feel about something. And usually that's just your knee-jerk reaction when you see something. Outside of that, I have a personal practice with social media that I do not ever. I just think nobody in leadership should talk about how they feel about issues unless it is to try to bring people together. So there are some times where I might post something and it's usually trying to say I can understand this and I can understand this. I mean, I think I did this once during COVID. I've done this a few times of you can share personal thoughts, but without, I don't reshare things that are extreme. And I try not to comment on too many things. But then probably the most important thing I think I've learned is when people are talking, I'm listening for the thing that I agree with, that I could comment on, right? So if somebody is talking and I know I'm not sure how I feel or I don't agree with, and this happens a lot in my non-Claris world or even in the Claris world, I will find that thing that I know we agree on and start there. And then if I bring in another point or try to bring in another point, it's always through story or experience. It's never ideology. So, and I have found bridges with a lot of people that you would not. My friends laugh because they're like, everyone thinks you are one of them. And it's true. Like, my liberal friends think I'm liberal, and my conservative friends think I'm conservative. They're
inviting you to Bernie Sanders, gatherings.
And if you ask them, they'd be like, yeah, she's one of us.
Yeah.
Because I see both sides, and I can very easily talk, with both sides, because I think there's valid points on all sides too. And I think those should be heard. And if people feel like they're heard, they tend to be much more open to, and I might pitch the other side to both sides just for fun, right? Just because I think it's good discussion. But yeah.
But starting with that shared humanity, you look for that because the tendency and the point of this book is that we have been conditioned in our modern American Western culture that has bought into the lie. It's all about the great, common enemy. We quickly look for the thing that says you're the other, but you're resisting that, looking for the shared humanity. The other one of the three, I want to talk about two of them, is we've bought into the lie, and it's a twist on the old term. And the lie is whatever doesn't kill us makes us weaker, which is different than whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Mm-hmm. So the lie in this book, and he unpacks it, is that we so don't want to be around other points of view because of how it emotionally affects us, how it disrupts our sense of security. And there's this sense in our culture where we no longer are even able to be around somebody else with a different point of view because we wrongly believe this is actually going to make me weaker, not stronger. Yeah. And what do you do on a personal level to expose yourself to different points of view, to be challenged? I mean, obviously the work you do, you naturally find yourself in it, so maybe you don't have to do extra. But is there anything that you can think of in this recent season that has challenged a point of view that has caused you to see something differently or consider something?
Yeah, I think it goes back to just like living in the city. I mean, so my family, my dad's family is, my grandfather was Black, and so we have this biracial influence. My grandmother's German, and my family has never really fit in. And so because my dad's Black, or we have Black family, people assume that I would feel certain ways about, let's say, even just race issues, without thinking through. But there's a whole history of how my family has always, dealt with these things. And so I think one challenge I've had in my life is sitting in circles where I'm uncomfortable, and I actually always leave feeling stronger, not weaker. So like there was an event at a church in a beautiful event in South LA. It was a Black church that invited. It was a Black church with a synagogue where the rabbi and the pastor got together, and they did this beautiful service with my friend Patricia Heaton. Who I think So Patty invited me to go, and sitting in that room was one of the most beautiful and powerful experiences of my life. And I'm hearing from the Jewish community, and I'm hearing from this Black church, and how the synagogue came around the Black church during BLM and just listened. And now they're just listening with all the stuff going on in Israel. And I felt like it was a moment of I'm sitting in the middle, and I understand a little bit of this culture and a little bit of this culture from my family. Both histories are in one room. And I just left feeling so privileged and grateful to have heard those things, which made me then challenge and think through a lot of things I would have never thought about had I not sat there. So I think vulnerability is what they're afraid of, because I think it's a vulnerable place to say, hey, I don't know if I believe that way anymore, or I don't know if I think that, and to go to my family and be like, well, I don't know if I agree with that, and parents are like, what? It's you live in LA. It's that crazy LA culture. And I remember we had a heated discussion over Christmas. Like, maybe it is my crazy LA culture, or maybe I've realized that you can't just be on one side of anything. And the more you listen and navigate the system yourself, the more you realize that things are not always black and white.
So if the lie is those uncomfortable places make you weaker, the truth is it actually can make you stronger. But what...
I think it always makes you stronger.
Always makes you stronger, right?
I do.
Yeah. And that reminds me, there's another book called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, and he talks about how in our modern culture we get sucked into these comfort zones that get smaller and smaller and smaller, but we're actually hardwired to overcome adversity. But we don't have to forage for food like we used to. We don't have to travel great distances, to migrate, and for the most part. And so we kind of fabricate first world problems. So it's like the sociological premise for these things. But in doing so, it weakens us, and there's such a lack of resiliency. Last two questions.
Yeah.
What's one habit you've developed in your life that really is life-giving for you? Is it taking time for yourself? Is it spending time outside? Is it spending time, with family, reading scripture, taking the long route home?
The right answer would be reading scripture.
No, there is no right. I'm just, what is, or is there something that, and even if it's, doesn't have to be daily, but something that you feel like, gosh, I'm at my best when this habit is in place, this rhythm, this practice.
I think being outside, I think when you're a high capacity person that just runs all the time, I've had to be very conscious of building in time for me. Even my rest time is, so I just ran the half marathon, which
congratulations,
the LA one, and so I had to build in my schedule time to run, which now I know. I don't know how you do what you do. I've read all your stuff, and I'm like, finding 2 hours to run in a weekend, it's discipline, right? It's a different discipline than I've ever.
5 a.m. is the only time I can figure it out.
So early at that Westlake Lake. That's why I saw your thing. I was like, oh yeah, I know all about that now. But I found listening, so I've always loved worship. That has been my, so I guess these two go. So one is in my car, turning off, I'm either like sermons, worship, or murder podcasts. So I've been
What a great trio.
I know, that's why. It's like worship or murder. So I've tried to dial up the worship, and then running, spinning, Pilates, like anytime I can do something physical, I feel just so much better with that combination. I feel, it's the information, and when there's constantly information coming in that is crisis or stress or, whatever. So taking that time out, I was like, I'll run this marathon. I will never run again. And now every weekend I'm like, oh, I have to get a run in, because now I'm like, oh, this is practice, has become habit. And I think it's become a good habit. So
that's amazing.
Worship in my ear. Those noise canceling headphones have been amazing, weird and amazing. But I'm like, I'm just left with my thoughts, and here we are. So I think that's been really, it's gotten me through this season.
That's awesome. Well, there's so many studies, neurological studies on the science of physical activity and what that does for people processing stressful situations, high capacity leadership, not only from what is processed even while you're sleeping, but even during the activity, how that processes things and kind of flushes out the bad and processes the good. Too much to get into right now, but the second question, we have a mutual friend who is no longer with us, who went to be with the Lord, Rick Bromley. And Rick Bromley was a longtime leader of our church and passed away from cancer couple years ago, and just a tremendous gift in so many circles that he ran in as a lawyer, as a dad, as a husband, as a volunteer elder leader at the church, but also very involved at Claris. What's one memory of Rick that you bring with you into this moment?
Yeah, this is going to be hard to talk about, but I think the hardest thing for me about losing Rick is he was my lifeline. Like, so he was our board president for many years, but even when he wasn't, he's the person I called if I needed to just process something at work. If he was a employment attorney, so he was my guru at all things. But more than that, he was just a friend, and as a dad who had adopted a child. My youngest was adopted as well. And so navigating challenges even in the adoption space, Rick was my person I would call. So he was, you were saying mentors along the way. I mean, he was probably one of my biggest mentors. I think he was the biggest mentor, greatest mentor in my life in this role. And so losing him, I've thought about him so much today, and just, you want to pick up the phone and just call somebody and they're not there. But the legacy that Rick left, I can hear his voice. And now I'll say, what would Rick say? And Rick was always like, is this worth it? That was his number one question to me. So here's all the things you can do, but is it worth it? Like, is it worth doing this, this, and this? And so I'll tell myself, no, Rick, it's not worth it. Like, I find myself in the car saying, it's not worth it. Just let it go, So now I give my team that same advice all the time, where Rick will say, sure, you can fight this, but is it worth it? And I'm like, no.
Which is so beautiful, because you use the word legacy, and so that means Rick is still mentoring.
Oh, he is, yeah.
And what a great reminder that the impact that we make doesn't always have to do with the title that we have. But it's your presence and stepping into the gap like Claris does.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it is the beautiful opportunity of just stepping into whatever is before you, not waiting for the promotion, not waiting for the job, not waiting for the title, but whatever that looks like, to step in. It's a great opportunity to be with you. How can people follow up with you to learn more about Claris? We'll put it all into the show notes, but are you, social media, anything? Can people, if they want to follow up with you personally or for Claris, or follow along with what's going on in your world?
Yeah. The website for Claris is just clarishealth.org, and I am on social. I think I'm.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah,
I'm on the Instagram
a bit,
mostly. Yeah,
that's
sometimes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, a joy to be with you. Be praying for you as this
Thank
Inglewood
you.
build happens. Going to celebrate it every step of the way.
Yes.
Thank you for your time. God bless you.
Thank you.